First things first, Zhao's drip marketing just came out, which kind of derailed my core argument from my last video. I will talk about that in my next video, but first I'm sticking with the content I was already planning. I considered tacking it on at the end of this one, but I think I might ramble on a bit too much about what I think co-op introduces to the game, so I think that it will be better off on its own. I've got no problem tacking on another 10 minutes to a 30-minute video, but I also think that doubling a video's length to talk about something completely unrelated is a bit too much. Anyway, before the rug was swept out from underneath me, I was already thinking about this video's goal, trying to address the idea that the Season 2 story is bad. I keep hearing voices complain about it, and I also hear voices complaining that ZZZ has gone in a new direction, lost its heart, etc., etc. Needless to say, I disagree. In my opinion, these complaints are somewhere between wrong and hyperbolic. Since adding a new voice to the choir is the entire premise of this channel, well, here we are. Now, I don't think I can convince anyone that they're wrong directly. Personal preferences are personal. So my idea for addressing this issue is to just summarize the story so far. Maybe there's some missed details or context that might make someone appreciate the current story a bit more than they currently do. I figure that's the best I can do, and if I can pull it off, I'm gonna call it a win. That's what this video is all about. A relatively quick summary of the Season 2 story, starting from 1.7 through patch 2.3. Time for some disclaimers. Spoilers, obviously. If you don't want story details spoiled, I don't know why you even clicked on this video. Next up, I'm mostly writing this from memory based on my own experience, so this will be light on details, evidence, and might even be incorrect in places. I'm not trying to compete with creators like Azrael Vanity. Please feel free to correct me in the comments. Okay, now I'm starting in 1.7, since not only does it set up the Season 2 conflict, but I also think it introduces important details about our, quote, villain groups. In the epilogue, we deal with two different villains, each from a different organization, somewhat working together. And each is also associated with one of our heroes. Tops, via Hartman and Hugo, and the Exaltists, via Dina and Vivian. Here's what I think is most important about these, quote, villain groups, Tops and the Exaltists. First, they are not monoliths. They are not completely controlled or organized, instead being made up of fully independent cells. They are an association of smaller groups, or even individuals, that have similar goals. And second, those parent groups are not inherently bad. Tops is composed of organizations with wealth and power in New Eridu, with a goal of maintaining and growing said wealth and power. But not every part of Tops is abusing their power. And the Exaltists are essentially a religion. A pessimist would call them a death cult, but in the context of ZZZ's world, I think that's too myopic. Their uniting belief is that there must be some way to merge humanity with the Ethereals, to not only be able to survive the Hollows and reclaim the world, but to also, maybe, rejoin loved ones that were lost in those disasters. Let's not forget that the Hollows have ravaged the entire planet, and most of the moon. Eridu was the last city standing, and then Hollow Zero happened, ripping even that last bastion in half, creating new Eridu. Almost all of our characters have tragic backstories, not just because it's an easy way to toy with our emotions, but because it's unrealistic for our characters not to have lost almost everything to the cascade of disasters over the last decades. Having an intact family tree in New Eridu makes you one of the luckiest people on the planet. Anyway, that first point, that the groups are not monoliths, is pretty important in the long run, since it means that we'll never really defeat those groups. We can stop individual plots, but they'll just keep springing up like weeds. Which, is good for future content. And the second point mostly just builds off of that first one. These groups will persist because they are filling roles in the city. At least when they start, they aren't always putting the city in danger. We can't fully eliminate a group like the Exaltists without trampling over innocent broken lives, just clinging to hope. I think it's also worth mentioning that these two groups often end up working together, but they are not directly linked. To put it bluntly, the Exaltists contain people willing to undergo unethical experiments, and Tops contains people running unethical experiments. It's a convenient match. Aside from that little diatribe, the other important bit from 1.7 is that the Exaltists are growing back fast, threatening a new part of the city, Waifei Peninsula. The mayor is taking steps to avert this via Phaethon, but I'll cover that as I transition to patch 2.0. I think it's important to introduce some more details first, related to New Eridu and the Waifei Peninsula. In the city of New Eridu, there are three major powers: Tops, the Defense Force, and what I'm just going to call the city. I'm assuming the mayor is the head of the city. I'd include Neps under there too, and Victoria Housekeeping. I'm not totally sure about Hand. I personally would include them under the city, but they're also very focused on Hollow Zero, which is to say that as long as the city isn't actively being consumed by a new Hollow, they're probably not around. There's definitely more, but I don't think that's important at the moment. What is important is that Waifei Peninsula is currently controlled by Tops, via Porcelumex, whose primary customer is the Defense Force. The city, the mayor, does not have any power or influence in Waifei Peninsula. If he tried to get directly involved, it's likely that the other two powers would squash him like a bug. Competing groups don't tend to voluntarily share power or information. Since the mayor can't act directly, he instead ends up relying on his connections to free agents, which is where Phaethon and the Yunquei Summit come in. Yunquei Summit are independent and powerful martial artists, which helped save the city during the Hollow Zero disaster, and they used to have a base in Waifei Peninsula, the Suibian Temple. As for the proxy, us, Phaethon, the mayor also appears to know more about us than even we do. In the epilogue, he not only gives us an upgrade to our eyes, which cures us of our low ether aptitude, but it also unlocks a new talent for ether manipulation. Also conveniently, the Grand Master of Yunquei Summit specializes in ether manipulation, and can help Phaethon learn to control those new powers. So while the mayor can't act in Waifei Peninsula directly, he can instead call in some favors with Yunquei Summit, and hire a freelance proxy to spy on what's going on in that district. All for the price of knowledge, training, and a huge electric bill. Maybe he also covered the cost of Belobog sprucing up the Suibian Temple. Most important, said proxy has a knack for wandering into and cleaning up messes, all while the mayor gets to stay on the down low the entire time. This is why we, Phaethon, aren't currently taking commissions on Internaut. We're essentially working an extended commission for the mayor, being paid with training now and answers later. Which finally takes us into Season 2, Patch 2.0. As I've mentioned before, this patch is really heavy on setup, which is why it's not that popular. After almost dying on the trip over, we meet a representative of Porcelumex, Damien, who's dealing with angry miners. The miners are upset because their anti-corruption meds aren't working correctly, and they're blaming Porcelumex for this, assuming they've messed with the formula to cut costs. A local doctor, Dr. Lore, is providing an alternative medicine, which it turns out is not much of an alternative. To skip a lot of details, it's not Porcelumex's fault, but instead a group of Exaltists. That group, led by Dr. Lore, has gone a bit off script. While a large and powerful group of Exaltists, headed up by the Overseer Mevarok, are building up miasmic energy in order to summon the Creator and put Waifei Peninsula in danger, they've been using volunteers only. Dr. Lore is acting on his own by dosing the miners. This moves up the timetable, but also exposes the plot, resulting in both plans being discovered. Ultimately, Yunquei Summit, with the help of Phaethon, puts a stop to everything. Dr. Lore sacrifices himself when caught, and while the Overseer still attempts the ritual to summon the Creator, Yizhuan stops it, killing the Overseer in the process. There's some more important bits involved, particularly how Miasma seems to be able to read, store, and reveal memories, or how Sarah is here working directly with the Exaltists, but neither of those elements have revealed their ultimate purpose yet. As a small epilogue, we also see the Overseer resurrected, but we'll soon find out that this is not quite true. That new Overseer conjures an ethereal which seems to be made from Yizhuan's memories. I think it's worth noting right here, right at the very start, that the idea that ZZZ's story has gone off on a tangent or left the main plot is just demonstrably wrong. We're working for the mayor to develop our powers and learn more about our teacher, which is also tied to the Hollow Zero disaster. The Exaltists' use of sacrifices and their attempts to reach the Creator was a huge part of the Season 1 storyline. It's now the main part of this new season, with Sarah being our primary link to that plotline. We didn't go to a magical, mystical foreign land. We crossed the bay and went to Hong Kong. Yes, there are mystic martial artists, but we run a VHS store. If Kung Fu isn't allowed in New Eridu, then there's a lot of shelves that we need to empty. Off of the soapbox, we're moving on to patch 2.1. In terms of the fight for power in Waifei Peninsula, the biggest changes are a drop in the Exaltist power and the establishment of Suibian Temple. We pick up exactly where we left off. With the Exaltist crisis dealt with, it's time to figure out who's to blame. A bunch of different parties are showing up in Waifei to investigate just that. There's a dinner meeting to launch this investigation, and we and Pan Yinhu attend as representatives of Suibian Temple. The primary purpose of this meeting is to introduce us to the representatives from those other powers. Damien introduces us to the first, Isolde, who's here representing the Defense Force. We then meet the heads of Porcelumex, Lucro, and Ferox, who are Damien's bosses. And finally, we meet Alice. Alice is the current head of the Timefield family. Her parents are dead and her grandfather is bedridden in the hospital. The Timefields make the anti-corruption medicine that the Exaltists sabotaged, so she's here to defend her family's reputation. But she's also young and inexperienced, and we see Damien immediately put the screws to her later that night. On top of that, Kami, a raccoon pet we'll see more of shortly, smashes into her hotel room window that same night, scaring her half to death. Panicked and stressed, Alice reaches out to an old friend from school, Luciana de Montefio, for help, who puts her in contact with a talented mystic/proxy that she knows, Phaethon. We then help her figure out what jump scared her the night before, which leads us to the raccoon, Kami, and ultimately Mystic Wares, where we meet Monato and Yuzuha. Technically, we met Monato last patch, since he was helping out with the miners, but it wasn't super important, so I didn't mention it. Anyway, Yuzuha teases the spoiled rich girl, and we find out she was snooping on some shady people and shipments moving in and out of the Hollow late at night. There's also rumors of a spooky, white-haired ethereal stalking the Lemnian Hollow. We end up Scooby-Dooing it up with all three of them, which leads us to discover a shady Porcelumex operation in the Hollow. We get caught, and we escape. The important points in the middle there are, Ferox is leading this operation, they're using Exaltists to run unethical drug tests, while also making sacrifices for some new plan. This site is being stalked by the white-haired ethereal, and that Yuzuha actually grew up here. She grew up in this lab as a test subject, testing some anti-corruption medicine. It turns out that years ago, Alice's dad stumbled onto her here while visiting Porcelumex, and in the process of rescuing Yuzuha, got killed. Long story short, Alice and Yuzuha work past bias and guilt and end up bonding over their shared past. We report about the lab, leading to Obel Squad and Yunque Summit leading a raid. And Alice also needs to cut a deal with Damien, offering Porcelumex the formula for the anti-corruption medicine in order for us to sneak in. We defeat the sacrifices, we capture Ferox, and then the Miasmic Fiend shows up and Obel Squad works with Yi Zhuan to defeat it. Spook Shack has each other's backs in the process, we win the day, and Alice effectively joins Spook Shack at this point. Arguably, so do we. It's just a forum group on the internet after all. As for the Timefield formula, Alice makes it public, completing her deal with Damien while sticking it to him at the same time, so good for her. The last thing of note here is that the Exaltists from this lab have been shipping containers all around Waifei Peninsula, which may or may not contain sacrifices. Which leads us into 2.2. Looking at our power board, Porcelumex takes a hit, leaving a vacuum for the Defense Force to fill, which it does by sending troops into the peninsula, now being led by Major General Lorenz. Yunque Summit maybe gets a small boost for helping out again, and as we'll soon see, the Exaltists didn't really lose anything in that last operation, so I'm giving them a bump too. In fact, this is pure speculation, but if I had to pull an answer out of thin air, I would suggest that the Miasmic Fiend was being used as a bloodhound to find the Porcelumex operation. I think this was another rogue Exaltist group, working with Ferox, and now that we've messed all that up, the Overseer's making lemonade from those lemons, taking advantage of their plan. I think that's plausible, because let's just rip the mask off right now, the new Exaltist Overseer is Isolde. As we'll soon see, I think it's more likely that Isolde was hunting Porcelumex rather than working with them, but I can't really back that up. Regardless, skipping a lot of faffing about as we try and figure out the latest Exaltist plot, Isolde springs the trap, releasing sacrifices all over Waifei Peninsula. In the chaos, she kills Lucro, the remaining head of Porcelumex, but we managed to save Major General Lorenz, for a couple of minutes anyway. Once the crisis is resolved in Waifei Peninsula, we debrief at the Silum Bay beach, where Isolde intercepts Lorenz, straight up executes him, and flees into the hollow. We rush after her, where we encounter Sarah, again actually, we encountered her during the faff about phase. Shifu sends Ye Shi-wan after her while we pursue Isolde. Meanwhile, the hollow's going nuts this entire time, the whole city is in danger. Catching up to Isolde, she pulls off an epic creator summoning, somehow turning herself into a sacrifice. We stop her, saving the day, but Isolde doesn't vanish into the ether like Mevarok, instead returning to her human form. She has no intention of returning to New Eridu to face justice, so another badass fight ensues where ultimately Isolde pushes Magnus to stab her in the heart by shooting Orphe right between the eyes. Turns out that was with Chekhov's Denny gun, so Orphe is fine, but let's use this as a moment to pay respect to Isolde. Lots of people were sad to lose another cool character design, but don't let that undercut just how badass she was. Other than the failed creator summoning, Isolde racked up one hell of a win streak during her brief time as the Overseer, and even after being defeated, she still went out on her own terms. If there's any real loser at the end of 2.2, it's Magnus. Magnus worked under Isolde, so she has the same backstory of her squad being sold out for money. Which means Magnus now has to struggle with weighing her own moral, inaction and loyalty, against Isolde's immoral, betrayal and success rate. And that's on top of the image of seeing her clone/protege get shot in the face. I suspect that Magnus doesn't get much actual sleeping done when she's offline. Moving on to the epilogue, Sarah has been branded the new Overseer, which I suspect is a mark that allows for direct communication with the creator, and seems to have been her goal the whole time. Ye Shi-yuan is also working with her now, under the promise of a chance to save his sister, more to come in patch 2.4. And seeing as we're now formally switching to Sarah as our main antagonist, another speculation I have is that Sarah is working for herself and herself alone. When we first see Sarah in Season 1, I'm assuming she's working with shady elements from Tops. So in Season 2, when she shows up directly supporting the Exaltists, that gives me the general impression that Sarah is using them more than she's an Exaltist herself. She 100% wants to meet the creator, but I'm not so sure her goal is the merging of humanity with the Hollows. I bring this up because while I'm sure we'll avert whatever major disaster happens in 2.5, I fully expect Sarah to achieve at least part of her goals and escape in the ensuing chaos. She is a real recurring villain vibe, or even potential as a future ally. She'll likely work with anyone as long as it furthers her own goals. TLDR, I think Sarah is working for Sarah in order to meet the creator, and like Isolde, she's probably going to achieve most of her goals. A final thing to mention would be the appearance of Krampus during the faffing about phase. Porcelumex has screwed up royally, and Krampus rep Zhao is now here to clean up the mess. Which takes us into the latest patch, 2.3. Time to update our power board one last time. Porcelumex takes another big hit, but they're not completely out. Damien is still around, and Krampus has arrived to fix the problem. I'm not quite sure where that leaves Damien. I really hope we do see him in 2.4 so that we can find out. If his hands are clean, he might be the new head of Porcelumex, and maybe he'll owe us some favors before this arc is over. The Defense Force also takes a big hit. Not only did they lose leadership and troops from the fighting, but Isolde and her supporters' betrayal also piled on further losses. The Exaltists also took a huge hit with their latest plot defeated. As I just mentioned, Sarah seems a bit independent, so I'm not sure if there's any major Exaltist plots active at the moment. We're only going to deal with a single Exaltist, aside from Sarah, in patch 2.3. Which I guess leaves Yunque Summit as the only real power left in Waifei Peninsula. I don't think that will stick, since I doubt Yizhuan wants control, and I also don't think Krampus is going to let Porcelumex collapse either. But for now, things are pretty quiet. In terms of the main story, all we're doing is chasing Sarah, and pondering what Ye Shi-yuan is up to. Briefly skipping past the Spook Shack stuff, Sarah enters a rift in the Hollow leading to a place we don't know because it has a locked until patch 2.4 sign on it. So the 2.3 story really doesn't move the plot forward much, and is instead mostly a side quest/rescue mission. It's still fun though. The kickoff is that after canceling Isolde's creator summoning, the Lemnian Hollow has shrunk, exposing new rich mining areas for exploitation. Between patches, Sarah hires a proxy with the mysterious power to see images of the past while in a hollow, which ends up being Yirari. Something happens, I'm not sure, but while Sarah finds the gate she's looking for, Yidari ends up trapped in the Hollow with an Exaltist, creating a town. And within that town, the Hollow can create a drowned memory, which is an ethereal copy of a person, but based off of some regret or unachieved dream in their past. There's also a powerful ethereal stalking the town, the Wandering Hunter. We get involved because Spook Shack is investigating rumors about that town, while they're also having an in-person meetup with two of their other forum members, which we've yet to meet. Speaking of, the first, Lucia, joins us right at the start of the story, but the second is still missing. It's Yidari. Once again, skipping past all of the faffing about, the key points are that most of the people that spawn drowned memories are trapped in the miasma, slowly starving to death, and also that Yidari can't leave. We rescue her, but when we attempt to leave the Hollow, it somehow infinitely loops on itself, so we need some help. That help appears as a martial artist construct, Master Bon Yue, related to Yunque Summit in some way, I think. He's been messaged by Yi Zhuan to look out for us while she's attending a meeting in the city about everything that's happened so far. We also get help from Krampus, where Zhao is now also joined by Dial-In. We get some mysteries about Krampus' motives and goals, and another mystery about Bon Yue's past. But as for how we'll save Yidari, the short version is that Krampus lends us an experimental MacGuffin to free everyone, it gets damaged, Monato teams up with his drowned memory to fix it with the power of manliness, and we save the day, allowing us to continue chasing Sarah. Following Sarah's path into another part of the aerospace city, we get stopped by the Wandering Hunter. We defeat that ethereal, where it's revealed that it's actually Lucia's dad, who disappeared years ago during a mission, so she gets to say goodbye. We also find out that the little Lucia drowned memory we've been encountering was the ethereal's memory, not Lucia's. I'm not sure how important that is, but I figured I'd mention it. Finally, we find the gate that Sarah used, which won't open until patch 2.4. The only other thing I think that's worth mentioning, and maybe it's been in other parts of the aerospace city and I missed it, but in this last area, I noticed warning signs about time and space distortions. I call this out because it's got me thinking that this aerospace city we've been walking through all season is less SpaceX and more Black Mesa. Which wraps up my summary of the main season story so far. But before I reach any conclusions, let's not forget about our side stories. ZZZ still makes sure that all of our new limited characters get a chance to shine, which is something that I really love about this game. In 2.0, we got Jufufu's side story. It's probably my least favorite in the bunch, but that's mostly because I was expecting something much funnier. I still want my ninja kung fu catfight. Jufufu joins a movie set with an idol of hers, where it turns out that the lead actor intends to use some ancient Tiger Thyron Bell to steal Jufufu's power, which is maybe also related to why there aren't that many Tiger Thyrons, them having been constantly consuming each other. No matter, Jufufu is the hero, and so she triumphs. There's a good chance there's a lot I missed on this one. Jufufu, and to a degree all of Yunque Summit, is heavily influenced by classic kung fu movies, which I just haven't watched much of. I know there's a ton of references in her marketing videos, but I only recognize the ones from Stephen Chow movies. As far as old kung fu movies, the only movie I'm familiar with is Drunken Master. So it's possible this whole side story is packed with references and I just didn't get any of them. In 2.1, we got the beach event. It was fun, but I think the most notable thing from it was seeing Chinatsu from the Angels of Delusion meet Astra. I'm still expecting the post-climax story to be Astra buying out the 404 Air Club and using the Angels of Delusion to start her own independent record label. So that meetup certainly doesn't hurt my speculation. In 2.2, we got Flora's side story. Aside from introducing background from the Seed animation in the game, we also find out that while Flora is weird, she's not quite as crazy as it seems at first glance. We get to see her accept that Seed isn't going to wake up anytime soon, and we also get confirmation that Seed has ties to Helios Academy, just like us. Seed's powers, and her ties to Helios, are probably the biggest "this will be important later" content that we've seen so far. And finally, in 2.3, we got 2 side stories. Yidari's is pretty basic, just explaining the source of her freaky eyes. Her parents had to inject her with experimental drugs to save her during a hollow disaster. The second involves Lucia domesticating a haughty ethereal, while also stopping a fellow member of her tribe from running experiments that are disrupting the hollow. My interpretations of those events was that Chestnut, the haughty, was the night horror. So it was the night horror that summoned more haughty in the final fight, not Lucia. I think that's important, since I think the addition of the night horror adds to the lore of the creator, in that there seemed to be some intelligence hidden within the hollows, potentially a full pantheon. In my mind, the night horror is potentially either equal to, or at least related to, the creator. It also doesn't hurt my theory that Lucia was originally intended to be a sheep. The night horror appearing as a wolf, hotties or dog-like, picking off the flock in the night one by one. The night watchers would then be both shepherd and sheep at the same time, on top of also being a loose reference to the Romani culture. I'm no expert on this, hell, I'm not even an amateur, but if you thought Dami Dami was Celtic, I'm pretty sure it's actually influenced more by Eastern European folk music. I also have to say that the joke at the end of this story, when Monato approaches Cairn, is easily my favorite joke in the game so far. One last thought pre-conclusion, here's a bonus mystery I came up with during a later draft of this script. Why did the first Overseer Mevarok turn into Ether when defeated? We never actually see them turn into a sacrifice, so were they one already? The drug we saw used on Bringer did seem to work, allowing him to maintain his human mind. If they were a sacrifice, then was it simply a matter of willpower that Isolde didn't disappear into the ether when defeated? Or was it because Isolde used a ritual instead of a drug? I've got no answers. Which finally brings us to the conclusion. Has ZZZ lost its way? Did all of this miasma, mystic stuff come out of nowhere? Have we lost the main plot to pursue some new tangent? No, I don't really think so. We're continuing to follow the main plot that has been present since the start. We haven't really touched on Fairy or the AIs, but honestly, neither have the devs. Other than the prologue and our reason for rescuing Rain in Chapter 3, the AIs have yet to really appear in the main story. For now, Fairy is just what she's always been, a useful MacGuffin. As for Waifei Peninsula, we're there dealing with Tops, the Defense Force, and locals, all while working for the Mayor of New Eridu and slowly revealing mysteries about an aerospace city and finding out more about Carol Arna and the Helios Academy. Which is to say, we are firmly entrenched in the retro-future world of New Eridu. We also just so happen to be dealing with a cult worshipping the Hollows at the same time, which were consistently teased throughout the Season 1 events and a large part of the Season 1 story. So in my opinion, there's another separate problem with the Season 2 story, and I've got to give credit to Jay Stern, link to the related video in the description, for helping me to nail this down. I do think that we've spent way too long in one place. If there's anything that I really do want to change about the Season 2 story, or see avoided in future seasons, it's staying too long in one place. We were based in 6th Street for all of Season 1, but almost every new chapter or patch involved us going to someplace new. And those places didn't even need to be big. Most of the additions, like Elpis Harbor, Reverb Arena, or Starloop Tower, were relatively small. But each one also expanded the city and gave us new places to see and new places to hang out with our agents, as well as new things to do. In Season 2, we started out alright with Waifei Peninsula, and 2.1 added Siloam Bay and the Fantasy Resort. But after that, 2.2 didn't go anywhere new, and in 2.3 we only went somewhere new in the Hollow. Our little slice of New Eridu hasn't grown at all since 2.1, and I'm not really expecting it to either in 2.4 and 2.5. Needless to say, I think it's going to feel really nice to return to 6th Street in what I'm predicting will be patch 2.6. I'm also hoping that we stay local instead of being ferried off to a new region when we start dealing with Tops and the AIs in Season 3, assuming that's what will ultimately happen. I think I'd rather see the city grow around our little home at Random Play than have us shuffle off to new districts each season. Or at the very least, limit any location changes to only a couple of patches instead of the bulk of a whole season. And that's it for this one. Even if none of this was new to you, hopefully you at least appreciated a refresher. There's only like one more week until 2.4, which has quite a lot to set up if the 2.5 climax really wants to hit hard. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's clear that we'll be learning a lot about the Ye siblings, and obviously we're going to end up saving Shengguang in 2.5. So right now what I'm most interested in is learning what exactly Krampus is up to, and also what Sarah ends up pulling off. No doubt the next two patches are going to be rough for quite a few characters. And with this wrapped up, I gotta start scripting the next video. Obviously, the devs aren't scrapping the defense role, and I think co-op is a big factor in saving that role. In fact, the reveal that 2.5 is supposed to include co-op is possibly a much bigger deal than you may think. But I'm saving those thoughts for next time. Make sure you're subscribed if you don't want to miss it.